friend of mine, J. Scott Neal, has one of her manuscripts from one of the many books that she wrote. And he showed it to me, and it was all handwritten with no corrections. So when she sat down to write, her soul was so clean, her mind was so clear, she wrote in perfect penmanship with no corrections. I don't know of anybody that does that, any writers that do that. So I'm going to have Reverend Liz read to you from the front of your program something Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote about being mystical.
The universe, both visible and invisible, is a spiritual system. Humanity is a part of the spiritual order, so indivisibly united with it, the entire cosmos is, or may be, reflected in the human mind. Evolution is the awakening of the soul to a recognition of its unity with the whole. Material evolution is an effect, not a cause. This reverses the popular belief, declaring that evolution is the result of intelligence, rather than intelligence being the result of evolution. The aim of evolution is to produce a human who, as the point of his or her objective thought, may completely manifest the whole idea of life, may bring unity to the point of particularization, finding nothing in the law to oppose it. The man Jesus became the Christ through a complete realization of the unity of spirit and the absoluteness of his word. His physical and spiritual faculties, his objective and subjective mind, were completely poised and perfectly balanced.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate that. You know, I love what Ernest Holmes writes. He says, evolution is the awakening of the soul. And it's the point where we realize that evolution is not the result, is the result of an intelligence that is inherent within all of humanity. So what Ernest is saying is that that intelligence was always there, even in the midst of the Paleolithic era when modern Homo sapien appeared on the planet. The same amount of intelligence existed in them as exists in you and me. So it's important for us to know that, because sometimes we get confused and we think that all of our modern inventions make us smarter. They don't. They make us busier. They occupy more of our time. I mean, how many times did they tell you the invention of the computer would free you up? Anything but. So intelligence is really inherent within you already. It's important for you to know that, because if you think I'll only be smarter if I learn that program, or I buy that computer, or I learn that technology, and I know sometimes the older you get, more resistant you are to technology, and the tendency is to think I must not be very smart because I'm having a hard time comprehending how to use that technology. That is not a measure of your intelligence. It's just simply a measure of whether or not you want to occupy your time looking at the screen or actually talking to another human being. So both have their place to play in our society, in our culture. But the thing that's important to remember about mystics, as I said last week, is they tend to go below the superficial nature of life. So on the surface, we have this life that is superficial and connected in circumstances and conditions and people and places and events. And it's connected by our sense of what we call empirical ability to discern what's going on around you. It means everything I hear, see, smell, taste, touch, and feel is how I sort of evaluate how life is functioning or not functioning. But if you only go by that empirical system, what happens is the surface of your life gets crustier and crustier and harder, and you are left to manipulation, because that's all you're left with on the surface is how do I manipulate my thoughts or other people's thinking to try and get them to do what I want them to do, or behave like I want them to behave, or to give me what I don't have, and so on and so on. But the mystic breaks through the crust, goes to the deepest part of that relationship, which doesn't have any empirical sense of itself. It doesn't have sight, doesn't have hearing, doesn't have smell, but is in fact everything you see, everything you hear, everything you taste, everything you smell, everything you touch. So it's in fact the composite of everything. Now it's hard for humans to imagine a composite sense of life that is so complete and so whole and not existing on the surface, but it does exist on the surface, but in the form of you and I. We are a part of that wholeness, but if we don't recognize it, we will separate from it. And people who live in separation from the wholeness of life from that perfect unity of being, they suffer from fear, huge amounts of worry. They suffer from huge amounts of catastrophic events that seem to propel their lives forward or propel their lives backward, but never seem to be satisfying. So the satisfaction factor of life will not be found in winning the lottery or in achieving a degree or getting a job or even finding the perfect right relationship. The satisfaction factor will be found when you can break the crust of the surface of your life and go to a deeper relationship, oddly with that thing that's called your higher power, that power that resides within you. And once you break that crust, then what happens is you leave what Rumi calls, and I love his quote, it's on the front of your program, it's also on the blue cheat sheet that I gave you. It says, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. When we get past the need to be right, and I admit, I still have that need as much as anybody else does in this room, but the only need to be right, the only way you can be right is you have to elevate yourself at the expense of somebody else being wrong. Now, I had a person stop me after last service and said to me, he said, I don't resemble that remark much. And his complaint was, he said, can't I just be a little right? And I said, no, because you see the consequence for that is you have to live basically in isolation. You have to live in isolation from other people because eventually those people around you, you'll have to make them wrong to elevate yourself, to stay elevated in that field of righteousness. And so it's like, okay, what do I want to do here? I want to go to Rumi and I want to get some information from him, but I also want to change the way I'm thinking so I can go to Emma Curtis Hopkins. And what she says, and this is great, if love does not know how to give and take without restrictions, it is not love, but a transaction that never fails to lay stress on a plus and a minus. Now that's brilliant writing. If love does not give and take without restrictions, it's not love. So it's hard sometimes to give and take without restrictions because in our modern day culture, the tendency is for our media to define love as that factor of chemistry and consciousness where you meet the perfect right person who never disagrees with you, always supports you in whatever you say. And of course, that's not the reality of what life is about. Life is really about sort of a constant interaction with people where you will find agreement and disagreement. But if you have developed the consciousness or the awareness of love, the kind of love that Emma Curtis Hopkins is talking about, you will absorb the energy of all negative and even positive thoughts, and you will transmute it into compassion, which is understanding. Now, compassion is also the fifth habit of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I love it because I give it sort of an Italian flavor. Because Stephen Covey says, I seek to understand and I seek to be understood. So I say, I seek it to be understood, I seek it to understand. Together, I seek it to be understood, I seek it to be understood. Understand. If we can, in fact, listen to people with the ear of compassion and love, we will see past behavior. We will see past ill-gotten, manipulative, scheming ways, and we will see the essence of who that person is. And Marianne Williamson in Course in Miracles is famous for saying, every person who is acting out is simply crying for love. They just want love and to be loved. And the challenge amongst those who are awake and aware is how do I love somebody who's misbehaving, who's creating chaos or toxic even in their thinking and their thoughts, is that you and I have to create a consciousness that literally absorbs the energy of whatever they're saying and thinking and translates it back into perfect acceptance of that person in their evolution but not a rejection of their intelligence. Perfect acceptance of who they are in that point in their evolution. Now that's sometimes, how difficult is that to do? It's really hard, especially if you're being attacked. Or am I the only one that's ever been attacked? So how can you tell if a person is a minister? By the arrows in his back. And attack happens frequently, judgment, decision-making, analysis, and people suddenly are like tearing down that which is the truth. And so the tendency is if you get resentful or if you take it personal, you can't respond with love. All you respond with is an equal amount of anger or toxic thinking. So you cannot allow yourself to be infected by that kind of stuff. Now mystics, they're not infected at all. They keep going deeper into the unity of life because they're in the unity of life. They are completely immune from all analysis and all judgment, all negative thinking. That does not affect who they are. They come forth with this great sense of wisdom, and they say things like, as Rumi says, and I love this is what he says, water in the boat is the ruin of the boat, but water under the boat is its support. Now that is a great saying. A lot of people saying, well, what does that mean, water in the boat is the great ruin? Well, if you have water in the boat, what happens? You sink. So you want the water where? Under the boat, and you want the boat to be pretty secure in what it's about. Now, a lot of people have boats that are landlocked because they don't trust. They don't trust that their lives will float. So they have the appearance of being together, but not the faith. You hear that? The appearance, but not the faith. If you don't have the faith, you will never, in fact, move your boat into the water to see if it floats at all. Because if it doesn't float, you got to get it back on land and fix the leaks. But the way you fix the leaks is very important. Because what you want to do is not fix it with anger. Because what if you get a hammer out and you start banging on the boat with anger? That doesn't fix the boat. That makes what? More holes in the boat. It makes it worse. So you can't fix the boat in anger. You can't fix anything in your life. In any state of being upset. So what you want to do is you want to involve and invoke and initiate relationships with those around you who have the skill to fix the boat without laying a hand on it. Because the boat I'm talking about is you, your persona, your willingness to accept the love of other people in your life. If you're unwilling to do that, more holes will be in your boat, and they won't be holy. You will sink and sink quickly. The first time you embark upon a relationship or embark upon an endeavor that requires faith. So a mystic says you've got to fix that boat. Now, Emma Curtis Hopkins makes this wonderful saying. She says, if you can redden your face with a thought, you can straighten your crooked bones with a thought. That's an amazing statement. If my face can be reddened by the way I think, then perhaps what's broken within me could be fixed by just rethinking my life. And to rethink, another word for rethinking, is to recognize. And the compound word is to recognize. To recognize what? The universal, unlimited unity of God. Universal, unlimited unity of God. Which means that there is this presence that resides within me that's completely capable of not only fixing the boat, but creating a whole new boat that I could literally have faith in and trust. So the minute that happens, the crusty ground under you becomes liquefied. And for some people, that's a terrifying experience. I know in counseling, sometimes I'll talk with people and they'll say, well, it looks like something's finally starting to happen, but I'm scared to death because I don't know if it'll work this time. It seems that I'm entering into a relationship, but I don't know if it's going to work this time. Or I have a chance to reconcile with my son or daughter, but I don't know if it's going to work this time because the last time we talked, it wasn't working. And what you forgot to factor in, two things. God is constantly changing everything. And your faith in that, and your trust in that, will allow you to refloat the boat, and guess what? Invite into the structure the very people who were too toxic to be there before. Now sometimes, I know, some people will come to me and say, well, what about really toxic people? Well, how about your consciousness absorbing that toxicity so you're not offended anymore? You're not allowing yourself to be offended anymore. You're not allowing yourself to be negatively influenced anymore because you have made a connection with a power greater than that. And that power now begins to convert all of the complaints into requests, because that's all a complaint is, a request that doesn't know how to get made. And if somebody's complaining because of this, that, and the other thing, it's because they don't know how to say, I don't know how to ask you to love me. I don't know how to ask you to listen to me. Now listening. How important is listening on a scale of 1 to 10? 10. As a matter of fact, Rumi says the following. He says, if I can catch this part. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Move outside the tangle of fear thinking. Live in the silence. Live in the silence. It's hard sometimes to live in the silence because we trust the noise more than we trust the silence, because the silence doesn't offer us a way out. It offers us a way in. And many people just want a way out of the pain. They want a way out of the cacophony of feelings that they're having. But what you want is a way in to a power that literally transforms those changes into that new presence of you that begins to become aware of its own power to love, to forgive, to have compassion, and most important of all, to initiate life. Take the initiative. It's the person who says in their mind, I forgive you for whatever was necessary to be forgiven. And I forgive me. And in that process, you are teaching yourself how to absorb the mystical sense of what life is truly about. Now, I remember when I was teaching school, when I first started doing things professionally back in the 60s and the 70s, I taught school, and I taught in Irving, California. And there was one fellow in my homeroom class who was quite a bit older than most of the other kids. You could tell he'd been held back. And he was angry. He was really angry. And he said something really bad to me. But I always respected him because he said Mr. Turrell before he said bad things to me. I thought, well, that was some sort of sign of respect. But, at the time, I was just starting in this teaching. And I remember the minister saying that day, or that Sunday before I had this altercation with him, he said, anybody who's in a state of anger is in a state of fear. And I think to myself, wow, I had never thought that anger was in fact fear. This is back in the 70s. I was slow, but I was worth waiting for. So when he got angry at me, I said to him, what are you afraid of? And that caught me completely off guard. Totally off guard. And I felt so in control. And then he thought for a second, and then slowly returned to his anger. And he really yelled at me then. I mean, he really, I thought he was going to get violent for a minute. And I said, well, you're welcome to leave. It's okay if you need to. And he did. And he left. But I'll never forget. What are you angry at? What's your fear? What are you so afraid of that you have to be so angry? And I asked myself the same question. Because anger could be in the form of just a low-grade worry. How many people just have that low-grade worry, like a low-grade fever? You go to work with a low-grade fever, everybody says, okay, no, I got a little fever. So what if you said, I got just a little worry? I'm sitting there, in this sense of doubt. And mystics come forth and they say, you don't have to live there anymore. You could live in something much more powerful. You could live in your faith. You could live in your sense of initiative, your sense of compassion, your sense of receptivity to a greater idea of yourself. And a lot of people might say, well, where do I get that idea of myself? How do I find that thing that I'm looking for? And of course the answer is in the silence, in that silence. And sometimes, and this is where you all come in, everyone in this room, when you're totally healthy in that silence, then you can sit with a person in silence and literally observe them change before your face. You don't have to say a word, but you sit in that silence, completely and totally receptive to a higher power moving you and them together in perfect love. And when that love begins to emanate just simply through your own silence, I'm telling you, it moves mountains. It moves mountains without effort. It moves mountains without trying. It moves mountains without words. It just moves mountains of anger and hate, just dissipate, dissolve, and pretty soon, transparency. And then the person sees themselves for who they are. That's a healing. And then they come back and you pull them back into the boat. And you can't remember why you ever threw them out in the first place. Because they've changed. And so have you. But you gotta trust it. You gotta trust that the change is constantly going on. God's not lazy. God's constantly in there. Not manipulating, but moving love, more and more love through you. Knowing that as soon as you wake up and see love, you'll see it exactly for what it is. Now, Rumi wrote, he's also known as a poet. This is one of my favorite poems. I don't have this in your program, but I'm going to post it on our website on Tuesday, so you can look for it there. He says, you suppose you are the trouble, but you are the cure. You suppose that you are the lock on the door, but you are the key that opens it. It's too bad that you want to be someone else. You don't see your own face, your own beauty, yet no face is more beautiful than yours. It's too bad that you want to be someone else. You don't need to be anybody but yourself. And I know you've heard me say that before, and I know you've heard other people say that to you. But that's the quest, to find a self that's not in pain. It's just happy to be alive. And to let that self come forward. And let it express by means of you. You know, when two people get married, I have one piece of advice I give them. Don't look for happiness in the relationship. You won't find it. But bring your happiness to the relationship, and they bring their happiness, and there will be more than enough happiness for both of you. You cannot divine happiness out of a relationship, but you can bring it to the relationship. But that's not just true of marriage. That's true of every relationship you're in. You don't have to see, you don't have to want to be somebody else. And it's too bad that you think you do, because you don't. And in closing, this is another quote. You were born with potential. You were born with goodness and trust. You were born with ideals and dreams. You were born with greatness. You were born with wings. You are not meant for crawling, so don't. You have wings. Learn to use them and fly. Thank you. Please make welcome back on the platform, Miss Thelma Jones.
In my life and times, I've sung a lot of songs. Yes, I played some bad rhymes. I've acted out my life on stages with 10,000 people watching, but we're alone now. I'm singing my song for you. I know your image of me is what I hope to be. I've treated you unkindly, but oh darling, can't you see? There's no one more important to me. Won't you see through me? 'Cause we are alone now. But I'm singing this song for you. You taught me precious secrets, truth withholding nothing. You came out in front when I was hiding. And now I'm so much better if my words don't come together. Listen to the melody, 'cause my love is in there hiding. I love you in a place where there's no space or time. I truly love you with my life. You are all friends of mine. When my life is over, please remember that we were together. We were alone. I was singing my song for you. Singing my song for you and you. for you.